Now, horror and gaming are about as well suited for each other as strawberries and cream, dry skin and moisturizer, or Bethesda and bugs. It's hard to find a better way of scaring the pants off people than placing them into the shoes of somebody going through something unimaginably terrifying. So let's take a look at them today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror video games that had no right to be this good. Number 10, The Mortuary Assistant. Short indie horror games with a simple concept and some frightening moments are a dime a dozen. The Mortuary Assistant, on paper, seems like yet another of these flash-in-the-pan titles, but it deserves way more credit than that. In this game, you play as a mortuary assistant who is haunted by a demon. The game forces you to perform arbitrary embalming duties in a tedious and meticulous process. Now, while that sounds boring, you will be on edge the entire time, as frequent scares will have you constantly guessing when the bodies will jump at you next. This isn't just a scary game, it's also got a surprisingly deep narrative. There's a deliberate fleshing out of the demon world, with different occult practices helping you learn more about the monster that's stalking you. The frightening gameplay, terrifying antagonist, and dense story all come together to form a title with frights and ambition by the bucket load. Number 9, Mundan. If you look at some brief footage of this game's opening, you'll likely think of it as a glorified walking simulator. On the surface, that's not too bad, as a simple gameplay experience with a decent narrative and a luscious art style can definitely be entertaining. However, this is far from a walking sim. It is a fully realised horror title. The game puts you in the shoes of Kurden, a man who returns to the titular town for his grandfather's funeral, but mysterious events surrounding the grandfather's body lead him to climb to the top of a mountain, solving puzzles and battling creatures along the way. Everything you could want in a horror title can be found here, including a tense atmosphere, engaging narrative, tough combat, challenging puzzles, a power progression system, and even a mechanic that simulates being overtaken by fear. As you can tell, you'll get plenty of bang for your buck in this indie Swiss title. It would be remiss not to mention the gorgeous art style as well, which is designed to make the whole game look like a sketchbook drawing. It not only adds artistic depth to the game, but also makes the experience that much more uncanny. Number 8, American McGee's Alice. Now, Alice in Wonderland is typically seen as a fun, charming, and upbeat fantasy tale, but there's plenty of darkness to be found in the original novel, and American McGee, a former developer at id Software, certainly saw it. That's what gave birth to this gothic harbour and utterly epic video game. American McGee's Alice takes the titular heroine and turns her into a chaotic force of nature. Rather than the sweet, innocent girl found in the book and other adaptations, this version of Alice is a traumatized woman whose family died in a house fire. She travels Wonderland but finds that her damaged psyche has ravaged this once lively place. The highlights of this game can be divided into both story and gameplay. The narrative takes you on a deep character dive, allowing for the setting to reflect the guilt and anguish of the protagonist, but on the side of the gameplay, it's a tight, fast-paced and well-polished third-person action experience with some fun and varied weapons. And if you like this one, you'll also love Alice Madness Returns, a sequel that continued the trend of satisfying action and a scary-as-hell version of Wonderland. Number 7, SOMA. The development company behind this title, Frictional Games, are known for the YouTube smashing hit Amnesia: The Dark Descent. As such, it's easy to assume that this title will be another horror experience just like that, albeit with a fresh coat of sci-fi paint. Well, while the gameplay does match their previous title to an extent, the narrative of SOMA will utterly blow your mind. The game takes place in an underwater research facility populated by machinery that seems to be showing signs of human life. You play as Simon, an unlucky soul who's found himself trapped in this place. Regarding the gameplay of this title, it's perfectly fine, if maybe a little lackluster. You encounter a slew of different enemies and must stealthily avoid them, something that grows pretty tiresome throughout the game's runtime, but the real highlight here is the narrative. The story and philosophical elements are so strong, so profound and existential that they will leave you reeling. It begs the question of what human consciousness even is and presents a ton of ideas that are terrifying to imagine. And who expected that from the folks who made Amnesia? Number 6, Detention. There are some truly great side-scrolling horror games that could easily steal a place on this list. Titles like The Cat Lady and Limbo are certainly two names that come to mind, but still, when it comes to picking out just one of the pile, you'd be mad not to grab Red Candle Games' sensational horror adventure, Detention. This game puts you in the shoes of two students, Wei and Ray, during the White Terror, a period of martial law in Taiwan. There you solve puzzles, unravel a narrative thread, and attempt to survive against the terrifying spirits that haunt the building. Side-scrolling horror puts puts you into a perspective that can sometimes make you feel distant from the action, making it tough for developers to well and truly scare the player, but that is not an issue here, as the atmosphere and mystery of this game will get you quaking in your boots no matter how far you feel from the environment. The narrative of this gaming experience is deeply rooted in history and reality, which gives it an unsettling yet fascinating vibe. Adding to that is the inclusion of Taiwanese mythology, which grounds the supernatural elements into something tangible. Number 5. DARKWOOD. Now, the previous entry talked about how a side-scrolling horror can leave the player feeling detached from the world they're supposed to be scared by. Well, that sense of distance is expanded twofold when you move the camera into a bird's-eye view top-down format. By that logic, the game should be a walk in the park, right? But oh no, you'll be definitely scared with this one. You will be very scared. Now, Darkwood, as the title suggests, places you in a mysterious dark forest that seems almost to be a malevolent being in itself, and you're tasked with surviving in this harsh land by scavenging, crafting, exploring, and battling. Rather than overloading you with cheap shocks and scares, this game gets you on edge through its use of anticipation. There are no monsters jumping out at you from nowhere, as the use of sound always makes it clear when danger is near, but the tension never lets up, as it's actually hard to tell where your death could be coming from until it's too late. Additionally, it's incredibly punishing, as the game does not hold your hand at all. Instead, you're dropped in and forced to experiment and master the mechanics yourself, leading to a satisfying, if rather challenging, learning curve. Number 4. DOKI Literature Club. Spoiler alert, although if you haven't heard of or played Doki Doki yet, that's kind of on you. Japanese dating sims are definitely the kind of thing that you either avoid like the plague or play them quietly when no one is looking. The act of chatting to a harem of girls as a player-insert protagonist is not the most fulfilling gaming experience unless you're feeling rather lonely. This is why it came as a big surprise in 2017 when a game by the name of Doki Literature Club exploded in popularity. Still, once you actually got your hands on a copy and gave it a go, it was incredibly clear why this title became such a hit. The first couple of hours have you living out your best anime high schooler life, writing poetry in the titular club and chatting with each of your favourite gals. However, at the climax of the first act, things take a drastic turn towards violence, misery, and fourth-wall breaking horror. From there, the game devolves into an array of clever scares and a terrifying antagonist, proving that you should never judge a book by its cover or a video game by its art style. Number 3. Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly. Video game sequels are definitely a tough act to pull off. You've got to juggle between keeping pre-existing fans happy and changing the formula enough to make the follow-up feel different. It's a balancing act that many titles struggle with. Fatal Frame, however, utterly nailed it. The first installment of this series was a strong and promising title. It was creepy and atmospheric with a focus on the camera obscura mechanic, which saw you defeat spirits by taking photos of them, and it put you right in the firing line for terrifying moments. When it came to making the sequel, the developers created a masterpiece of gaming horror. The story, which focuses on a pair of sisters exploring a paranormal village, was gripping and provided plenty of reasons to be afraid. The village itself was creepy, the ghosts were terrifying, the mechanics were tighter than ever, and the lore was very dense indeed. Alongside the terror, though, the game also had a solid emotional hook thanks to the sister pairing. Their ordeals, relationship, and potential endings delivered a narrative that was way better than it ever needed to be. Number 2. Omori. There's a boatload of cute-looking 2D RPGs with spooky elements. You've got Earthbound's Final Gygus Battle, Undertale's True Lab, and even Pokemon hitting you with Lavender Town Syndrome. It's safe to say that this genre can definitely pack a scary punch, and Omori is a pure example of committing to that. Released in 2020, Omori is a role-playing game that puts you in the shoes of a shy and reclusive young boy who flips between reality and a dream world. You explore both the real and surreal environments, which feature an array of colors, characters, and terror. The game plays expertly with emotions, both in the player and narratively. This can be seen in the protagonist's inner turmoil and even in the gameplay, with your party having specific abilities based on the emotions they emit. Part of what is so surprising about this game is how damn scary it can be. It doesn't throw constant attempts to freak you out, but the moments when it does, well, they hit like a ton of bricks, thanks to the clever imagery and focus on psychological horror. This is a game that makes you feel nostalgic for those childhood moments when a game you were playing got you sweating with fear out of nowhere. And number 1, Silent Hill 2. Fatal Frame 2 only popped up a few entries ago, yet it's time to delve back into the pool of horror gaming sequels that went way above their station. And there is perhaps no better example of this than the seminal Silent Hill 2, a title often touted as being one of the best gaming experiences you can have, regardless of whether or not you actually even like horror. The first Silent Hill game was an unexpected hit for Konami. It paired body horror with a terrifying environment and a creepy cult, and so when it came to the sequel, people expected more of the same, but what they got was a profoundly moving, ethereal, and nuanced nuanced drama that still scared the crap out of them. The story follows James Sunderland as he ventures forth to the titular town after receiving a letter from his dead wife. From there, a horrifying story about guilt, trauma, and sin plays out. Silent Hill 2 delivered a deeply personal story that acted as a deep dive character study. Even the horror itself all fed back into the trauma and psyche of James. It also marked the debut of the iconic Pyramid Head, so it definitely deserves some points for that as well. This game completely changed the vibe of the series and was a considerable risk for Konami, but it became the benchmark to judge all future sequels, which unfortunately they've kind of failed to live up to. And there we go, my friends, those were 10 horror video games that had no right to be this good. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules, and you can go follow me over on Instagram at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there. As always, I've been Jules, you have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.